Progress.
All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on a Saturday afternoon, and welcome to the Jenks Center. So just a little housekeeping. If you'd like to sign up for our e-newsletter happenings, you can do that on the website. Please be advised that we are recording today, the program, and that you may be asked to participate in an online survey that will come in an email. All right, so in July, of course, we have Decorating with Color with Stacey Martin today. That's July 10th. Then we have Composer's Corner with host Andrew Celentano and guest Paul Hartung, and that's on July 13th, which is Tuesday evening. We have the Beatles Sing Along with Diane Therese, and that's July 17th. That's next Saturday evening. We have the Cape Cod Journals of Henry David Thoreau, which is interesting because, Stacey, you do quote Thoreau, don't you, on your website?
I do, my opening page.
So you might want to check this out. So this is with historian Richard Smith, and that's on July 20th. He usually comes in costume, but this time he wanted to come as himself. He's been writing books about Thoreau for a long time. I think 30 years he's been involved with the Thoreau Society. So he works for them also. We have Car Racing with Jim Shaw. He's gonna show us how he got involved. I even think he's gonna take us on a little video where we're driving with him at 150 miles per hour. So that might be fun. And then we have A.T. Alon, now please, I'll probably butcher his last name, Trecamontiu. He races Porsches, and he is going to show us how we can become race car drivers. That's on August 3rd. We have Walking Winchester series. And I'm not sure, I think it's still up in the air whether it's the Dellin Museum, because they are doing renovations, so we might have to put something else in on that day. We have Composer's Corner with guest Bonnie McLeod. That's August 10th. We have Budget Decorating Tips and Tricks with Stacey on the August 14th. We have Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady of the World, and Cheryl Fay is a one-woman show, and she's going to present that for us. We have Stretching for Daily Maintenance Workshop with John Saya. That's August 24th. He's going to show us how we can take care of ourselves every day by stretching. And then we have Feng Shui Your Space with Mei Hong. She did come last year. She's going to show us again and maybe go a little bit deeper into how to do that with our dwellings. So that brings us to thank you for the Cummings Foundation that has enabled us to have programming for our evening and weekends for the last 3 years. We actually did 99 so far events online. So that was quite an accomplishment, and they allowed us to do that. And they have given us very generously a grant for the next 10 years. So we are all set, and we thank them so much for that. And that brings us to today. And thank you so much, Stacey, for being here. I'm going to ask you to just, in case we have new people, just talk to, you know, maybe your education, how you got involved, and then we will get right into decorating with color. So thank you again for being here, everyone.
Yes, I always enjoy these presentations, as you very well know, and I love hearing from all of you, and especially at the end when you share your design dilemmas with me. So don't hold back. That's always my favorite part of the presentation. So as many of you know, some of you may not, I'm Stacey Martin. I own and operate a design firm here in Stoneham, Massachusetts, called the Freshmaker. And we specialize in casual, cool, elevated spaces that have an unapproachable luxury. So I love sharing all of my design tips and tricks with you. And I believe that any and all small changes that you make in your space can really have a big impact, not only on your space at home, but on your life and the way that you live. And so today we are going to talk about color and how that impacts your space and how you feel. Can everyone see this okay? Give me a thumbs up. Yes? Okay, great. So I want to do something a little bit different today. Usually we save questions until the end, but I thought since during the summertime the groups are a little bit smaller, it would be nice to have a more interactive presentation. So if you have colors during the presentation or on anything related as we're going through, don't hesitate to speak up and let me know, or you can hit the raise your hand button, and hopefully we can get to your questions as we move through. And I think it will benefit everyone. Usually questions are shared between people. So thank you so much for coming. And again, as I mentioned in my other presentations, if you don't want to take notes and you want to go back and reference this later, this information will be up on my website within a week or two. Then you can reference everything we're talking about today there. So let's get started. How to decorate with color. Color can dynamically affect a space and really change how people feel when they enter a space. But as I'm sure many of you know or may have experienced, it can go awry pretty quickly. So there definitely is a formula and a way to use color successfully. No matter what color you're using, there's always a strategy for using it. And that's the reason why some rooms are successful in their use of color and some are not. As you may or may not remember from some of my presentations past, I love to show the what not to do. And we had last month some pretty terrible color examples in there. So the key overall is knowing what colors and what color tones work well together. So before we look at room examples to really show you how the colors vibe, we're going to start with some basics. So it'll be a little color theory 101. And I was telling Hillary earlier at the beginning, before you all signed on, that this was a fun little trip down memory lane from design school. I haven't thought about basic color theory really this much since then, and I'm not going to tell you when that was exactly. I don't want to date myself, but anyway, this was really fun for me to think about. So we're going to start with the color wheel. Many of you, as you may or may not know, the color wheel is representative of the color spectrum. And so the primary colors are the colors that cannot be mixed on the color wheel. They exist as they are in their true form. So there is no color that you can mix together to create red, to create blue, and to create yellow. And so these are the primary colors on the color wheel. The secondary colors on the color wheel, and I'll explain why all of this is important in the next several slides. But the secondary colors on the color wheel are created when you mix the two primary colors together. So many of you, I'm sure, remember from grade school, red and blue make purple, blue and yellow make green, red and yellow make orange. And the secondary colors definitely kind of help complement each other. Now you have the tertiary colors, which are created by mixing one primary color and one secondary color. So if you see over here on the edge, the red and the orange, when you mix them together, you get a red-orange, or you mix the red and the purple together and you'll get a reddish-purple, so on and so forth. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the complementary colors are the colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So you have purple and gold, blue and orange, and red and green. And these colors, when paired together, they intensify each other. And that's something important to think about when you're decorating your room, because if you want to create a space that's vibrant and exciting, then complementary colors might be the way to go. But if you're looking for a space that's really calming and you love purple, then pairing that purple with a yellow is not going to create that calming space that you so desire. So again, complementary colors are the ones opposite each other on the color wheel, and they intensify each other. Analogous colors are the ones that are next to each other on the color wheel. And in this instance, in this example, you have shades of blues moving into greens. You can use as many analogous colors in your color palette as you would like, but in order to create balance, it's best to choose one dominant color in that analogous color scheme. So for example, if we're thinking about the blues, greens, and yellows, then use primarily blues, let's say, and then sprinkle in a little bit of the green and then just a touch of yellow. Monochromatic colors are colors that are shades and tints of the same color. So if you look at the red, for example, pink, maroon, those would be monochromatic color palette with the red. And then same with the blue, you'd have a navy, blue gray, all paired with a light blue. Uh-oh, I'm getting a weird, it won't let me change. Might have to do this again. There we go. Color theory, warm and cool colors. So splitting the color wheel in half, you have a warm set of colors, which are the reds to the yellows, and then you have a cool set of colors, which are the purples through the greens. And now the warm colors are helping create a warm and cozy atmosphere, and the cool colors focus on those if you want to create an environment that's a little bit more cool and relaxed and calming. So now we're going to get into some examples. So this is an example of a room that uses a primary color palette. Here you can see that they use red, blue, and yellow pretty equally, but the yellow does seem to be a little bit more dominant than the rest of the colors. And a primary color palette is a great choice for spaces that you're trying to achieve a youthful, playful look. So a lot of times children's rooms will use a primary color palette. You'll see it in nursery schools, preschools, that sort of thing. But it's also great for a space that you just don't want people to take too seriously, you know, maybe a game room or a den or even an outdoor space. Those are all great areas to use a primary color palette. And as we go through, you'll notice that these successful examples of color pairings are generally grounded with neutrals. And we'll go into that a little bit more as we move through the slides. But that is another key factor in making sure that your room doesn't, as I like to say, look like an explosion at the crayon factory or the clown circus. So this is an example of a secondary color palette. And if you remember the color wheel, purple, orange, and green were those secondary colors that were the colors that you mix two primaries together to get the secondary. And now the sofa skews more pink than purple, but primarily you have the orange and the green in here. And this creates an interesting room, but it is certainly more calming. And so a secondary color palette is a great choice if you want a room that feels visually interesting and more dynamic, but still inviting and not as energetic or lively as, say, one with a primary color scheme. And now the tertiary colors, if you remember, were the ones that were used or created rather by mixing the primary and the secondary color. So this takes the tones and the palette another step further toward the muted and calming direction. And so this is a great space, a great choice rather to use in a bedroom, maybe a powder room, something like that, a space where you want to create a little bit more sense of calm, but still, again, some interest. And now a complementary color palette, like we talked about, when those two colors are together, they really energize each other. And complementary color palettes really create a room that feels eclectic, but still pulled together. So if you want something that feels a little bit more, again, dynamic and different, that you could really put your stamp on, that really feels like you, a complementary color palette is a great way to go. But again, you want to make sure that you have a dominant color there. So if you look in the image on the left, the blue is really the dominant color, and then the orange comes in as a secondary amount of color there. And same with the room with the purple walls on the right, you have those gold elements, but really the purple, because it's on all the walls, really dominates this room. And that's what allows it to really still be successful, even though you're working with some pretty saturated colors here. Now, an analogous color palette is the one, again, where they're all next to each other on the color wheel. And this is generally, in my experience, the palette or the color approach rather, that most designers are using right now. It's very forgiving. It's a lot easier for people to accept color into the rooms with an analogous palette versus a complementary palette, for example. And it's a lot easier, again, to incorporate existing pieces with an analogous palette. So for example, if you already had that green sofa, it would be much easier to create a beautiful pulled together space in an analogous palette with the green sofa versus trying to pull together a space that had the complementary color. So again, analogous color palettes are the ones that are all next to each other on the color wheel. In this example, it's the blue and the green. And they are still interesting, but they create a much more serene and calming space. Another great thing about analogous color palettes is they just pair really well with neutrals. So a lot of times you'll see a hefty dose of brown, of tan, of cream in these analogous palettes because they're so serene. That dose of neutral makes them feel even more so that way. And you'll want neutrals in every room when you're working with color to help balance it out again, sort of like a palette cleanser. But in this particular color palette, the neutrals play a little bit more of a starring role, and they really act more as one of the main colors in the palette. Monochromatic colors, as we talked about, are the tints and shades of one single color. So you can see here primarily blues used in this space. And even on the wall, they did what's called an ombre treatment, which is when you start with one color on a wall and you move up or down and move toward another color. And you can find that generally on a fabric or on a wall, but an ombre treatment is something that's used on an object, and it really signifies a monochromatic color treatment to that object. And again, a monochromatic color palette will create a space that's a little bit more peaceful. And this one is a little bit easier as well for people who are just starting to dabble in using color in their space and are a little bit unsure of how to use it and are unsure of the commitment that they want to make to color. I think choosing one that they feel that they like the most, and then going a little bit on the darker side and a little bit on the lighter side, and then mixing in some neutrals. Generally, you can't really go wrong with that. So it's monochromatic and analogous are both kind of the foolproof color palettes. If you're looking to get more color into your home, those two would be great places to start. Now, I got fancy on you guys this week or this month. Now we're going to talk about how to use color. So first of all, one thing that is really, really important, and I actually start all of my client projects with this question, is how do you want your space to feel? How it feels is certainly just as important as how it functions. But if you haven't determined what you want your space to feel like, nothing you do in that space from a design standpoint will be successful, because you're going to be kind of grasping at straws and not really approaching it with a plan. So if you look at the image on the left, this person, I imagine, wanted a children's bedroom that felt happy, fun, and playful. And so this color palette really reflects what they were trying to achieve there. And then same with the image on the right, one could say that the homeowner wanted a space that was serene and cozy, and choosing a color palette that worked with that feeling and helped achieve that feeling was really successful in this room. Now, the second way that I would say to use color, if you're just starting to branch out and interested in the idea of adding more color to your home, starting with the accessories is a great place to start. And so you can never really go wrong if you have a neutral palette to start with. So the image on the left, as you can see, has a neutral wall, a neutral flooring. All the furniture, save for the blue accent chair, is pretty neutral. And then the accent pillows and the artwork and the books on the coffee table, the throw over the sofa, those are all of the things that are adding and injecting color to the space. And those are low risk items. You could go to Home Goods or Target and purchase some throw pillows or some coffee table books that are not incredibly expensive, and really inject some personality in your space for not a big investment up front. And then if you don't like it, or you get sick of it shortly thereafter, you haven't invested that much, versus spending thousands of dollars on a velvet green sofa or something like that. And if you look at the image on the right, again, only the accessories are really the color pops here. The wall color and the sofa color, though they're saturated, are still both neutrals. So you can go with a light neutral, or you can go with a dark neutral, again, depending on the mood that you want to create in your space, and really amp up your accessories to create something that has a little bit more energy, some more color, and a little bit more personality. When you're thinking about this, I like to suggest the 60-30-10 rule. So as I've mentioned earlier in this presentation, having a star of the show or having a dominant color is always a good idea. And then, so that should take up about 60% of the color coverage in your room. And then another color should take up about 30%, and then another color about 10%. So if we use the image on the left as the example again, the 10% I would say would be that pop of yellow. It doesn't really appear very much other than that big toss pillow. But I would say 60% of the color is probably the blue. You have the side chair that's blue, you have a large bit in the painting that's blue, and a large blue stripe on the pillow. And then you have, so the blue is 60% and the 10% is the yellow. And then the 30% I would say would be the reds in between. So again, when you're thinking about your room, think about dispersing your color in that ratio, and then you'll always have something that's sort of the biggest amount, medium amount, and smallest amount, sort of your Goldilocks color ratio. Does anybody have any questions so far, or want me to elaborate on anything? All right, well then we can keep going. So another great way to ease yourself into injecting more color in your space is starting either with an accent wall or an infrequently used or less prominent space. So maybe you want to have a little bit more fun in your powder room, for example, versus like a main first floor bathroom. Or maybe you have an office, a home office tucked away down at the end of a hallway or up in an attic space. Doing something interesting to that wall in front of your desk, for example. Those would also be really great ways to add some color, and in a way that's a little bit less risky. My dog is under the desk right now and he's dreaming and barking. So forgive me if you hear a dog making all kinds of funny noises below me. He's hopefully chasing squirrels in his dreams. Another great way to think about applying color to your space that's relatively foolproof is to start with an inspiration piece. So if you know that you want to add color, but you don't really know what colors you want to add or where you want to start, and you've thought about how you want your space to feel, find that painting or find that rug that really speaks to you and really helps support that feeling that you want for that space, and then pull those colors from there. So if you look at the image on the left, starting with this art piece, you know, they've anchored the room with this beautiful blue sofa, and then they've pulled those oranges and those yellows out from that painting. And now the room is really, really pulled together and it's all come full circle. And same with the image on the left, starting with that rug, they took a tone from the base color of that rug and applied it to the wall. So now they have a beautiful, cozy, serene space to work with. And then they pulled a little bit of the yellows as an accent, and the warmer tones like the reds and the golds come out in the tones of the furniture, the wood sideboard that they're using, the coffee table, the basket, that sort of thing. So starting with an inspiration piece is also generally a foolproof way to add color to your home or to a space and really make it feel pulled together. So another thing I always like to mention, which sometimes I think people don't think about, when you are painting a wall to add color to your space, a lot of people will paint just all their test squares just on one wall, on the same wall. And oftentimes as well, I find that people forget to label them. So if you're using 3 different kinds of gray, 3 different types of white, whatever the case may be, it's very easy to forget which one is which. So I always recommend painting them in the same space on the wall and labeling them with a pencil, and then go to other areas of the room. Go to the darkest area of the room and paint your swatches there, and sometimes paint them in a corner. Get the darkest part of the room and paint your swatches there. Then get the lightest part of your room, so whether it's opposite a window or something like that, and paint your swatches there, because you would be amazed at how much a paint color can change based on the natural daylight or your overhead light, how many lumens your light bulbs have, et cetera, et cetera. And so making sure that ensuring that you see that color throughout its whole spectrum, the darkest it's going to be and the lightest it's going to be, depending on how the light changes in your space, will make a massive difference in how you choose that paint color. Another thing that I always like to recommend is it's okay to choose a single color palette and repeat it, as long as you change the ratio that you use that color per space. So if you use exactly the same ratio of color in every room, it's just going to feel a little bit flat. It's not going to feel exciting. It could feel more like a commercial space, like a hotel or something, you know, that needs to be the same throughout. So using a cohesive palette and a cohesive series of colors will make your whole room feel pulled together, but changing the ratio will allow you to change how each room feels, but it'll also allow you to change, allow you to create more interest as you move throughout your space. So if you look, for example, at the image on the left, we have a nice color palette at the bottom. We have some teals, some blushes, and some beautiful neutral grays. And so in the bedroom, the blush is the dominant color. It's mostly blush and gray, and then you have a little bit of the rest coming through, and you have a tiny bit of the teal coming through. And this creates a beautiful feminine palette for the bedroom. But if you move over to the living room, you might not want it to feel as feminine and serene as your bedroom. You might want it to still feel pulled together and relaxing, but maybe a little bit more masculine. So pulling out that dark teal color and anchoring it a little bit more with some darker shades of those grays and some darker shades of that blush are really helping this space feel a little bit more masculine. And one thing that I want to mention as well is don't be afraid to use shades of the same color. So this color palette again on the left has 5 colors in it. But as you're moving throughout your space, you can inject more saturation into some of the colors. You can inject a little bit more white into some of the colors. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility, and that's what's going to help make your space feel a little bit, have more depth and feel more dynamic. And this slide piggybacks on that same concept. So use varying hues of your colors to create interest and depth. So if we're looking at this image on the left, this is a monochromatic color scheme. You can see that the accent color pretty much is blue here in this space, anchored with white and neutral. But it's not just one color of blue. I'm sure you've all seen the living room or the bedroom, whatever it is, that's a neutral palette, and then every accent color is exactly the same shade of blue or the same shade of whatever color it is. That's the accent color. And that's not terrible, but it doesn't really give a room a sense of depth or really make it inviting or interesting. And so by using a variety of those same hues, it really adds some more interest to your space. And even adding those hues in the form of a pattern would take it even that much further. If you look at the image on the right, again, the orange, kind of burnt orange color is the dominant color here, but they really run the gamut with how they use it. Sometimes that orange is really light, sometimes it's more saturated, but it still has depth, it still feels interesting, and it still creates movement throughout the room. So ultimately, it's okay to pick one color as long as you have a lot of varying hues within that color, but it's not recommended to have it feel matchy-matchy. So throw out the sofa pillows that came with the sofa that are the exact same fabric color and find yourself something that has a little bit more depth and interest, and that alone would do wonders for your living room. What I have said in the past, and I wholeheartedly believe in this approach to decorating in general, is that neutrals will tame a space. So whether you have a big dose of pattern, or in this case, a big dose of color, using some neutrals to tame that space and to create a palette cleanser will really make your color applications feel successful and sophisticated. So if you look at the image on the left, the wall is 50% of this beautiful saturated blue, but because the other 50% of the wall is white, it doesn't feel overwhelming for the space. It still feels bright and airy and open. And then these really dark chocolate tones help anchor it a little bit more and add that depth and make it feel, again, more dynamic. And then the kitchen on the right-hand side, that green is a very dark green, but again, taming it with that big swath of that gorgeous marble with the green veining really just helps cleanse your palette a little bit and tame that color. And also, it allows you to, this darker color in the kitchen allows you to add some artwork on top of it, and which serves as a neutral because of the brown frames, and a lot of the backdrops on these paintings have some gray tones in them as well. So those also help neutralize the dark color of the green kitchen. The all-white space. I don't know if you remember back in the day, Martha Stewart was really about the all-white space, and designers are bringing it back right now as well. It's very popular, but it's also very easy to make an all white space look clinical, stark, sterile, and boring. So how do you make an all white space, essentially it's one color, feel inviting and feel interesting? Well, now thankfully there are hundreds of white paint colors to choose from in all different finishes. So that alone, varying the wall white versus the trim white and using two different colors there, that alone would create a lot of interest in your room. But the trick is, again, thinking of white as a color and making it feel monochromatic. So what would a light white be? What would a dark white be? So now you're thinking in terms of like cream tones, maybe even a little bit of a tan, and then black and gray, adding those in there. And then we'll talk about this in a little bit, but then the undertones of the white, a cool white versus a warm white, and all of these other things. So again, as long as you think in terms of color and think of white as a color and vary the colors of the white in your space, your white space will never fall flat and it will never feel stark or clinical. But varying the white tones is certainly the key. And then also having some darker elements to really anchor that white. If you look in both images, there's a heavy dose of either black or brown, still keeping it in the neutral family so that it feels overall like a white space, but having those anchoring pieces also is really key to give the eye a place to move around. And the dark space, as you can tell by my office wall, I am a big fan of dark colors, especially in small spaces. And I have heard a couple of my clients recently had some hesitation using dark colors because there's still a stigma that dark colors make a space feel smaller. And that's actually not necessarily true. If you were to paint a small dark space a white, it would actually, because of all the shadow play in that room, it would actually feel very dingy and dirty, and it wouldn't give you the light, bright feel that you would be trying to achieve by painting that small space in white. So it's actually works to the advantage of the small space to paint it in a darker color, because it makes it feel more open, because those shadows sort of recede and are hidden within the dark paint color. It sort of neutralizes all of those shadows and dark areas and kind of tricks the eye as to where the space begins and where it ends. And so it can be used to not only make a small space sort of feel not necessarily larger per se, but it can kind of, again, trick the eye as to where it begins and ends, but it can make a very large space, one with incredibly high ceilings, feel more cozy and inviting. It can be very tricky, in fact, to make a large space feel cozy. So the dark color certainly is a great workhorse for doing that. Another reason I love dark colors is that they make anything you have look amazing. So the image on the right, for example, it's just a simple plywood desk and a simple plywood chair, but they look stunning against the dark space. It's almost like creating art out of the pieces, that the everyday pieces that you already own. And of course, it makes whatever art pieces you hang on the wall that much more elevated and that much more special. Now, this is a tricky part of color. So many of you have probably heard about undertones, whether you're choosing any paint color has undertones, basically, whether you're choosing a white or a gray, unless it's a true color, it's been mixed with other colors, so you will see some of those other colors coming through. So if you look at this example of all of these whites, as we move through the spectrum, you can start to see, for example, that cloud white has a little bit, some warmer undertones, some yellow undertones. So it's going to be a little bit warmer and creamier on your wall, versus paper white now has some more blue undertones. Decorator's white certainly has some blue undertones. And so again, as you get them on your wall, those undertones may shift slightly, but it's important to take that into consideration when you are choosing a neutral color for your room, because those undertones, again, change dramatically based on the lighting in your space, but they also change dramatically based on what other items are around them. So if you have, let's say we're using decorator's white, which has some blue undertones. If you're using that in a room and you have a blue sofa, those two blue undertones are really going to go nicely together and create a calming effect, because now you're in a monochromatic, you're working in a monochromatic palette. Versus if you have a warm white and a cool sofa, now you're creating sort of this difference, like in the complementary color palette, and they're going to amplify each other. And so that space is going to feel a little bit more energetic and a little bit more lively. So taking into consideration the undertones, and this is can be a little bit tricky, but definitely very important. So I'll show you some examples. So looking at these two rooms, they're both blue, right? But if you look at the image on the right, for example, a lot of these accessories, the purple, for example, the purple pillows, it works really well with this blue on the right, because this blue has red undertones. Can you kind of see how if you were to look at a color wheel, this blue starts to move toward purple a little bit? That's because it's got some red undertones, and therefore having accents of purple or reds or things in that vein will look really good with this color blue. Versus this color blue on the left, it has some yellow undertones, and that's why it looks really great. If you see on the bookshelf, there's a little chartreuse flower and there's a little yellow book. It looks great with those colors because it's got some yellow undertones. So seeing these two blues side by side, now you can really see how one wants to skew a little bit more toward teal. If you were to add more yellow to this blue on the left, it would go into a teal direction. And if you were to add more yellow, or pardon me, more red to the blue on the right, it would go into a purple direction. And so that's another good way to think about undertones. You could say, if I added a little bit more of this color or that color, what would it become? And then you would kind of get an idea if it's skewing toward one color or another. And now this is another example of showing undertones of white. So if you look at the bedroom on the left, this bedroom, the white has some purple undertones. You can see that it feels a little bit more on the cool side, whereas this white in the living room on the right feels a lot warmer, and it's got some more yellow undertones. So again, thinking about the undertones of your paint color, even if you're just choosing a neutral, is a great place to start when you're thinking about how you want your space to feel. So again, warm colors create coziness, and cool colors create a sense of calm serenity. So they're a little bit different in how you want your space to feel, but they're very important when, again, you're considering your overall palette and you want to consider what other elements are in that room, because they'll really affect how those undertones come through. I think that's the trickiest part, honestly, of working with color in a home. And oftentimes that can be the thing that's off, and that can be the thing why your room isn't quite working. And so just swapping out one tone of white or one tone of gray for another, whatever it is usually just the thing that needs to be changed. And my favorite part of the presentation is troubleshooting what's not working. So let's look at this living room, for example, and troubleshoot what may or may not be working here. So let's look at it. Is the color direction clear and defined? I would say we have some analogous colors happening with the blues and the greens and that heavy dose of neutrals like we talked about. But then we have a painting that's really primary, And we have a rug that falls almost in the complementary color zone. So I feel like there's really not a defined palette. I'm trying to hide you guys so that I can see all of my things. So does it invoke the feeling that you're going for? You know, this living room, I want it to be really calm, but obviously that bright accent painting is not really doing it for me. Are there enough neutrals to ground the space? I would say not really. I've got 2 white pillows and I've got 2 white chair cushions and some brown, but that's not really it. My sofa's blue. My other elements are blue. I've got a lot of blue and bright colors. So let's see what happens if we just swap out the artwork. That's a little bit better and we're getting closer, but I still feel like the rug isn't working. And so this is a little bit tricky because I think a lot of people would say, well, it seems like the rug would work, but why isn't it working? What's wrong with it? And I think it goes back to, if we remember at the beginning of the presentation, an analogous palette wants to be calming. All of the colors are on the same side of the color wheel, and there's a heavy dose of this yellow in the rug that's not really with the blue and the green that's happening, and it's also incredibly saturated. So I think it's the yellow and the amount of yellow in the rug that is the reason that it's not working. And at the beginning, if you remember, I had mentioned that analogous color schemes work really great with a heavy dose of neutral. So let's swap out this rug for a neutral. And now it works. Now we've got our tones of green. The painting has a variety of tones of greens. The plants bring in all of the other greens. You've got multiple tones of blue between the velvet poof and the denim blue sofa and the saturated blue hanging planters and the blue accent pillow. And that now you can really feel that this color palette is working together. All right, another big thank you to you guys. And if you want to reference this presentation, visit thefreshmaker.net in a couple of weeks or so, and it'll be all up there for you. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about what we talked today, you can go head right over there and drop me a line, shoot me some questions, or if you need help in your own space, I'm happy to help you. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about or anything they want to talk about that applies to their own space? Or any projects on the horizon and you're wondering about colors that might work in there or how to pair colors to update a space that you already have?
Shall we unmute video?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question.
I'm unmuting.
You
Hold
wait,
on one sec. Let's unmute.
You stopped our video. There we go. Hi.
Get in there.
I am Janet. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
My husband and I just purchased new couches. Our other ones were very, very old. So we have gray leather couches that will be arriving soon. Our living room walls are Navajo white. And I was thinking of doing maybe some pillows that might have some teal in them. I don't know what are your thoughts about gray couches in a Navajo white painted living room?
I think you're starting with a great base. I mean, you're starting with a neutral room, so you really can do pretty much anything you want. Do you have an area rug or a big piece of art that you want to use in that space?
I don't yet, but I could look for an area rug. Is that a good starting point?
That's an excellent starting point. I generally recommend either a piece of art or a rug if you don't have a place to start. And again, before you even start there, thinking about what you want your room to feel like. So if you want your room to be relaxing, or if you want it to feel a little bit more eclectic and vibrant and fun, thinking about that when you're looking for the area rug. And I generally recommend area rugs with a pattern. for a variety of reasons, but especially in a higher traffic area, the pattern hides dirt and grime a lot better. But then it's a great place for you to showcase your personality. And so you can pick something that really resonates with you and start there. And then from your area rug, pick the one color that you want to be the dominant or star color of the room, and then a secondary color and a tertiary color from there.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, great.
Great.
One more question really quick, Janet. What color gray are your couches?
They're sort of not real light, not real dark,
Would
sort
they
of
like that?
sort of a medium gray, I would say.
Medium gray.
Medium gray, and they're leather.
And they're leather. Can you tell if they have an undertone? Like, do they have a more red undertone or more yellow undertone?
I'm not sure. They haven't been delivered yet.
Oh, that's right. You did mention
I
that.
went to the store and looked, but I'm a little bit color impaired, I would say. But I do have a friend of mine who's a graphic designer who did have some suggestions for me. She's very good with color.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So I can ask her when the couches arrive, whether she thinks they're more gray or what was the other? I mean, what undertone were you saying?
Yeah, if they have more of a red undertone or if they have more of a yellow undertone, that can also help steer you toward what color should be in your area rug. So
Okay.
if you want it to be more calming, it's good to match the undertone. So let's say your gray skews a little bit more purple undertone, then picking some things with some red, some area rugs that maybe have a rust in them or something like that, a reddish brown, like that could be a good direction to go. So generally matching, I think the undertone will give you a more serene look, or if you do the opposite of it, it'll give you a room that's a little bit more vibrant, because again, the opposites on the color wheel will amplify each other and make it a little bit more high energy look.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck. I'm excited for you, Janet.
Me too, thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions about projects or furniture? All right. Well, it was awesome chatting with all of you guys today, and thanks for taking time out of your summer. I know summer can be hard, but I really enjoy seeing all of your lovely faces. And if you come up with any questions, again, shoot me a note. I'm always happy to answer them. So.
Thank you again, Stacey. Absolutely wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.